Hello everybody and welcome to this start again. Hello everybody and welcome to this webinar with Sellafield. I was going to call it a Sellafield webinar. After the huge success of the webinar last year, we've decided to hold another. We will start with Lauren and Molly and then move on to the grads Alfie, Iona and Alex. Molly and Lauren look after all things early careers at Sellafield. So for example, the recruitment process and the graduate programme. So before you start and after you start. So Molly, we're going to jump straight in and start with you. So could you tell the audience a little bit more about you and your role at Sellafield?
Yeah, so my name's Molly and I work in the early careers recruitment team at Sellafield. So we are responsible for filling the roles of graduates, students and apprentices in the company. Yeah. We are the first people to see your application when you apply for our graduate or student programmes, and we then guide your application all the way through until the end, and then we'll be the ones that will make you a conditional offer of employment. We'll then guide you through the pre-employment checks, and prior to your starting, we will pass you over to Lauren's team, where they will then look after your start week and all that kind of thing.
Perfect. So Lauren is the person that you're going to meet, you know, if you are successful, the whole assessment centre process, application process, and Molly is going to give us some hints and tips as well, all about how you can be successful when you put your applications in. So watch this space. You know, Molly's going to give you lots and lots of exciting hints and tips a little bit later on as part of the webinar. So thank you very much for joining us today, Molly. Lauren, on to you. So you're more involved in when the graduates and interns, placement students start. So can you tell us a little bit more about your role, what you do, and how you speak to the students as well?
Yeah, no problem. Hi everyone. So my name's Lauren. I work in the graduate team at Sellafield. So my role is the graduate development lead, so I'm responsible for the design, delivery and oversight of the 2-year graduate programme. So after you've been through the recruitment process with Molly and her team, they hand you over to us and we look after you whilst you're on the graduate scheme at Sellafield. I sit in a wider team called the Education and Skills Delivery Team, where we look after all apprentices, graduates and students at Sellafield. So I'm part of that team with a focus on grads, but you are also part of a wider early careers community at Sellafield when you're coming in our graduate scheme. So yeah, I look after you whilst you're here and make sure that the graduate scheme is everything you need and want it to be.
Perfect, I'm sure it will be. So we're in really good hands today, so we'll hear all about the process from Molly and Lauren. Lauren, I'm going to stay with you just to learn a little bit more about Sellafield. So I know as a company you're evolving quickly, you know, the nuclear industry is changing on a yearly basis, if not sooner than that. So can you just give everybody a bit of an overview to you as a company and the future goals that you might have in place?
Yeah, no problem. So Sellafield Limited forms part of the NDA group. Our main site is up in West Cumbria. We also have offices down in the Warrington area, but our primary site, is up in West Cumbria on the West Coast. Our purpose at a high level is to create a clean and safe environment for future generations. That's why we all get up in the morning and come to work, and we all contribute to that mission regardless of where you're at in the organisation. Yeah. And at a high level, we're responsible for mitigating a major national risk on the Sellafield site, which basically means we are it's a kind of high hazard risk reduction, and that is our #1 priority. We are going through, as you said, a bit of a transitional phase at the moment, where over the next 3 to 5 years, our activities are moving more from reprocessing through to retrievals, processing and storage of the risk and the waste on Sellafield site. We've got a load of information online about this that you can find through the .gov website. You can find our enterprise strategy, which outlines our goals for the next 3 to 5 years and actually up to 2040. So yeah, there's loads of information out there that I would definitely recommend people familiarising themselves with. But kind of everyone, our purpose, to reiterate, is to create a clean and safe environment for future generations.
Yeah, definitely. And I know you've got future, you know, so many future plans, which I'm sure students and graduates who are watching today that, you know, want to be involved in. So Lauren, as part of your job, I'm staying with you just for one more question. I bet when you, you know, that you meet the students, you meet a lot of students as part of your role there. I bet you come across a lot of, you know, myths, misconceptions about Sellafield and the nuclear industry. You know, now is your chance to kind of quash those misconceptions, those myths. Is there anything that you want to cover off as part of this webinar?
Yeah, I think probably the main one that we hear quite often, it more Sellafield specific than nuclear industry specific, is that we're closing down. People hear this word decommissioning and think, the site's closing down. Yes, we are going through into a new phase, going into decommissioning and more focus on high hazard reduction, as I mentioned earlier. But we do have a 100-year mission. The site isn't closing down. It's as I said, the enterprise strategy that we've got at the moment sets out the kind of near term up to 2040, but there is a 100-year mission post kind of after the enterprise strategy too. So you know, that would be my biggest thing, is it just because we're going into decommissioning doesn't mean to say the site's shutting down. There's a lot of work still to do on the Sellafield site. So I think that from a kind of a Sellafield specific perspective, but also from a graduate scheme perspective, that we only recruit STEM disciplines. We've got an array of different disciplines that we recruit onto our graduate programme. Primarily we do have STEM disciplines, but there are others that form part of more of our functional areas, our safety areas, so that there really is a vast array of jobs available at Sellafield, and it isn't just your typical STEM engineering type subject. It is much bigger than that.
Perfect. And thank you very much, Lauren. I know you've got lots and lots of opportunities that you can apply for now on Gradcracker. So students, make sure you watch this webinar, listen to the grads who are going to be speaking in just 1 second, listen to the hints and tips from Molly a little bit later on, and apply to the positions. So now I am going to hand over to Sophie, who's going to meet the grads who all found their roles on Gradcracker over the last couple of years. They've sat there and watched the webinar last year. So Sophie, over to you. Let's meet everybody.
No problem. Thanks, Carla. So I'm going to come over to Alfie, Greg, Iona and Alex now. And just a question for all of you to get us started so everyone can start to get to know you. What did you study and where did you go to university? So Alfie, starting with you.
Yeah, so I studied at Birmingham City University for both my undergraduate and master's degrees. I did those in property development and planning, and then construction project management, respectively.
Fantastic, thank you, Alfie. Iona, next to you.
Yeah, I studied maths at the University of Warwick.
Brilliant. Greg?
Hi guys, yeah, I studied for mechanical engineering. I done an integrated master's at Heriot Watt, which is in Edinburgh, if you don't know.
Brilliant, thank you. And Alex, finally you. Where did you go and what did you study?
Hiya, I'm Alex. I studied civil and structural engineering at the University of Sheffield, and actually had an industrial placement year as well after third year, while I worked at Sellafield for the year.
Oh, fantastic. Brilliant. Thank you so much, everybody. I think what I found really interesting when we were kind of doing the prep for all of this and looking at the disciplines that you'd all studied, there is a range there. You know, we've got mechanical, we've got maths, we've got civil, we've got property and planning. And I think that goes back to what Lauren kind of mentioned just before about the range of roles and the range of disciplines that can be recruited at Sellafield. So I thought that was a really interesting start.
I think that's where we're going to go back to, isn't it, Soph? So I think we've skipped forward a little bit. I think we're going to go back and speak to, that's why your face up was a bit like, right, is this moment now? So we're going to break the ice a little bit more and just come and speak to the grads about a top fact about Sellafield. I mean, these are really interesting, so looking forward to hearing these again. But Molly, we're going to start with you with your top fact, please.
Yep, so my top fact about Sellafield is that the Sellafield site up in Cumbria is the size of 6 Wembley stadiums, and it actually is that big that the site itself has its own train station stop.
Love that fact. Thank you, Molly. Lauren?
Mine's a little bit more learning and development specific because that's my area. As I said earlier, as part of education and skills, we look after all early careers at Sellafield, and we had a tot up and we have around 800 degree apprentices, graduates, students and apprentices currently on some kind of programme at Sellafield, which equates to around 7% of our workforce population, and that doesn't take into account people doing further education and higher education. So just to kind of emphasise that we are very kind of focused on our early career recruitment and feedstock into our organisation.
Yeah, definitely. I bet Molly's met all of those students. I bet she's sat there thinking, I know Lauren. Thank you, Lauren. Greg, on to you.
Yep, so in 1956, Sellafield opened Calder Hall. Well, the Queen opened it, and it was the world's first civil nuclear power plant.
And where's Calder Hall, Greg?
Sorry, that's in West Cumbria. That's on our site here.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Iona?
Yeah, so Sellafield hasn't just been a nuclear power plant while it's existed. It's also done a lot of fuel reprocessing. So when the fuel comes out of the power plant, once it's been used, it's not just plain one light element. It's all sorts of things mixed in together. So you've got like plutonium and uranium and some messy fission products that are just left in there. So Sellafield's had the Magnox fuel reprocessing plant that closed in July, but when it closed, it had reprocessed 55,000 tonnes of Magnox fuel, which is more than half of the volume of that kind of fuel that's been reprocessed anywhere in the world.
Wow. Thank you. That is wow. Thanks, Iona. Alfie? A lot.
Yeah, Sellafield has a capital programme of projects worth approximately 7.5 billion over the next 20 years, and currently has around 25 projects with a value of over £50 million.
Thank you, Alfie. So these facts are amazing. Alex?
So Sellafield site is actually home to one of Europe's most hazardous facilities in Magnox swarf storage silo.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Alex. So obviously we should have inspired you already just by hearing those top facts about Sellafield. But we're just going to loop back to Molly quickly, if we can, Molly, and just speak about the roles that are currently open to the students to apply for on the Gradcracker Hub. I know Lauren mentioned there's lots and lots of disciplines that you would recruit into, but specifically to our audience, you know, STEM students, Molly, what's on offer?
So now is probably one of the best times to be looking on our vacancies, looking at what we've got on offer. We are currently live for all STEM backgrounds across graduate schemes, industrial placements and summer placements. So just to give a little bit of background, our summer placements are a 10-week scheme and they would commence over the summer months of 2023. Then our industrial placement is a 12-month scheme. That is designed to be used as a year in industry or a sandwich year. So it's for current university students to apply and have a year out of uni, getting hands-on experience in one of our STEM roles across, whether that be across site or the design offices based at Brisley. All industrial placements as well will have the chance to be given development objectives at the start of their placement. And if they complete those and are successful, like Alex, who's on the call today, they may be invited back to join the graduate scheme for the year that they graduate. As well, for people that are due to graduate in 2023 or that have graduated in the past 3 years, we have the graduate schemes on offer. And those are a 2-year training programme with Lauren and a team that will help you through your training, and they're designed to help you work towards a chartered status and then potentially be retained to be a full-time Sellafield employee and work on one of our sites, whether that be in West Cumbria or in Warrington.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Molly. So let's go back to the grads. Sophie, on to you.
Thanks, Carla. I was expecting that one.
Just so everybody knows, I've got a bit of an itinerary behind the scenes and my word has just completely crashed. So we'll just sort this out between us. But Sophie, let's meet everybody.
No, it's fine. Thanks, Carla. Yeah, it's been really good to get a good intro from everybody and some cool facts to start us off. But we're going to find out a little bit more about our graduates that have joined us. So Alfie, I'm going to start with you. Could you tell us a little bit more about your current role at Sellafield and the team that you work in?
Yeah, of course. So I'm a graduate trainee on the Project Management and Controls graduate scheme. I started just over a year ago now, so I'm halfway through the scheme. And I'm currently on a project controls placement, working on a range of projects within Sellafield sort of legacy ponds area. The legacy ponds represent, I'd say, some of the most complex and difficult decommissioning challenges in the country and probably the world as well. They date back many years to a time when decommissioning wasn't really factored into the construction and design efforts of these facilities. So that's sort of what we're up against now. And project controls is oriented around utilising sort of integrated schedule and cost baselines to monitor and control the project. So that involves performance reporting, measurement of progress and cost to date, which will be covered within the project baseline. And by accurately reporting project performance to date, forecasts can be produced for a project's upcoming performance, can be used to inform management decisions to mitigate potential poor performance and to achieve that better than planned performance. And my team is predominantly made up of people in project control, so planners, cost engineers and so on. But you find yourself frequently engaging with stakeholders from across the wider project team just to bring you information that you can plug into your schedules and your baselines and so on.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alfie. And with your degree that you did, the planning and construction project management, did you have a lot of experience in this area before you joined, or have you had to learn a lot on the job?
It's kind of been a bit of a mix, really. So when you're looking at something like construction project management, you will be, doing your typical sort of project controls around sort of how you're going to fund a project and how you're going to control the spend on it, how you're going to schedule it, so making up Gantt charts in Excel and so on. But it's a very different beast when you get out of university and into the working world. It's a lot more full on, but I'd say that so far the point of the graduate scheme is that you're not just left on your own to sort of sink or swim. You're given real responsibility, but you're also given the training that you need to get to grips with different pieces of software and how you actually then apply it to something that's real and actually happening out on site.
Fantastic. And just one more question for you. I know I've gone slightly off topic. Going from a construction project management background, what kind of led you into nuclear? That to me isn't always a natural progression.
Yeah, no, I understand that. So when I was at university doing the construction project management masters, I just found myself really getting into kind of like heavy engineering, sort of capital works, infrastructure, things like that. So I was subscribed to magazines, reading about, different projects that are going on around the country, whether they're rail, road, energy, and so on. And then when I was doing my research and looking on Gradcracker for a graduate scheme, once I finished my degree, I came across Sellafield. And after reading about the works that were going on, it definitely appealed because, we've got a lot more of the science side of Sellafield, which I probably don't come into contact as much at the minute. So that's around fuel reprocessing and so on. But there is demolition works, there is new build going on site to further support the mission over the next 100 years. So it just seemed like a really good place to go for someone who's interested in becoming a project professional. So that's what sort of sucked me in.
I think that's really interesting. I think it's a really good point as well. The reason I wanted to delve into it is because it is one of those things that just because you're studying a certain type of degree, there's so many options out there for you, and to keep your options so open, because construction nuclear isn't everybody's kind of next step, or a lot of people won't think about going into that route, but actually there's a lot of opportunities there for a range of different backgrounds. So that's kind of why I wanted to touch upon that really quickly, Alfie. Iona, I'm going to come over to you next. Could you tell us a little bit more about what you do at Sellafield and what team you're working in?
So I'm working in the radiometrics team, which is sort of made up of physicists and engineers and a couple of mathematicians. We kind of take measurements and then do modelling and analyse the measurements to try and work out the radiological content of, it could be like a building, or it could be down to even just like a small object. So it's working out how radioactive it is, but also where the radioactivity is in that, and exactly what kind of radioactive it is, like whether it's gamma or alpha, that kind of thing.
Wow. I mean, that just went completely over my head, but I know there's going to be so many people watching this that'll be thinking, okay, that's exactly what I want to do. And it's an area that I'm really interested in. So thank you, Iona. We are going to find out a little bit more about some of the key projects that you've worked on as well, but I'm going to go over to Greg now to find out a little bit more about you. So can you tell us again what your role is and the team that you're working in?
Yeah, sure. So at the minute, I'm taking advantage of one of the kind of perks of the grad scheme, and I'm on my second secondment, so different to my first, but I am on the commissioning engineering grad scheme, and in my current role as a commissioning engineer. So at the moment I'm sort of learning my bread and butter really, on a really interesting project. Within the team we sort of we take new assets, new plant equipment, and we author test documents and execute the test documents to make sure that it's meeting standard and it's doing exactly what it was designed to do. So it's a lot of sort of on-site testing and experimenting.
Yeah, okay, fantastic. Again, not something I would have thought that you'd be doing on a nuclear site, but we're learning, aren't we? And then Alex, I'm going to come to you finally. Tell us more about what you do and the team that you work in.
Yeah, so I'm part of the civil and structural engineering team in MSSS, which is the facility that I mentioned earlier. So it's the Magnox 4th storage silo. Okay. And like Alfie said, these facilities were built and designed in like the 60s and 70s without decommissioning in mind. So it's an incredibly complex problem. And our main aim at the minute is just to retrieve the waste pretty much. So we've got these 400-ton machines retrieving waste. So part of the structures team, we're currently designing rails that these 400-ton machines are going to sit on. So you can imagine they're quite large. They've got a lot of lateral loading as well as vertical. And on top of that, I'm also producing substantiation calculations for the internal walls of the silos of the compartments, because the aim is take the waste out at different points. There's going to be differential waste and liquor pressures on these internal walls. Which is quite fun because the drawings that I'm looking at, we're drawn in like the 60s and 70s, so you're looking at inches and feet and stuff. So it's always fun looking at them. And yeah.
Wow. Okay. Fantastic. So I think we've just learned about there's 4 different graduate schemes, 4 different backgrounds, 4 different areas that everyone's working in. So what I'm going to do now is kind of delve into some of the key projects that everyone's worked on to find out a little bit more about what everyone's up to on more of a day-to-day basis. So I'm going to start with you, Iona, because your role it sounds so fascinating and completely over my head, but I also just really want to find out a little bit more about what you've been doing so far and some of the favourite projects that you've been involved in so far at Sellafield.
Yeah, so the big project I'm working on at the minute is kind of like my own investigation, but I've got control over where it goes.
Oh.
And what I've been given is what we're doing currently, which is, okay, go back to the beginning. There's a plant where there's some tanks, and these tanks used to have liquid going through them. Yeah. And there would be some evaporation going on. So all of these processes are happening, really interesting chemistry in there. But now the tanks aren't being used, and we want to leave them nice and clean so that when people come to them, like in a few decades' time, and are ready to take them apart, we've not left like a load of hazards there. So what they do is they wash them through with like more liquid, nice clean water or something. But they don't have like a way of measuring how much is left in there or whether there's like stuff that's crystallized at the bottom. Okay. And you can't get anything in there to like sample it. There's only one hole in the corner of the room that the tank is in that you can like stick a stick down through with your measuring equipment on the end. So you can take measurements from one corner of the room and you want to know what's inside. But that's where you get the mathematicians in, and you can use algorithms to like triangulate between them and build up this whole picture of what's inside. It's really cool. It does work, which is the exciting part. Yeah. But at the minute, the algorithm we're using, it's the one that they use in similar stuff in like nuclear medicine, like when you're imaging someone's brain. Okay. But we're not sure if it's the best one or if we should be using something else or using it slightly differently. So I'm like playing around, like coding stuff in Python, doing all these like simulations and things to try and see if we can make it better. Yeah, so that's my favorite project. It's quite exciting.
Wow.
I know.
That sounds amazing. How you might not be able to answer this or tell us like the real intricacies of everything, but if you're looking at a tank and you are trying to find out if anything's left inside, if it's crystals, things like that, how can you do that using an algorithm? How does that pick up like these minute disparities that might be left behind?
Yeah, it's weird. Like, it's basically all based on the fact that some parts are going to be more radioactive.
Right.
So if stuff is crystallized, we know that's probably going to be hopefully the stuff that's more radioactive. So it's going to show up more. So you have something called the dose, which is like how much radiation you would receive in a certain place. And it's kind of like if you imagine you've got a bin and you're stood in one place in the room and you can smell where that bin is coming from by moving about a bit. You know, well, like if I stand here, it's a bit more smelly. And it's kind of like that, but with radioactivity. So you're like taking measurements in different places and saying, well, it's a bit stronger here. So it's probably more coming from this place, and it all kind of adds up from back there.
Yeah.
And you build up like this whole matrix of it.
And then what happens from then on, Iona? Do your results go to a different team then to go in and investigate further and then try and get rid of the waste?
Yeah, so it's the strategy team that we then pass this back to. So we're working with that plant, they wash it out, we take the measurements, work out with the algorithms how much we think is left. Yeah. And then we tell them and they get to decide based on that whether they're going to keep washing it out or like stop or do it more or less.
And then does it come back to you? Are you going to ask that? Does it come back to you then to say, right, it's all clean now? Do you have to do your algorithms all over again?
Yeah, it keeps going around in circles.
Yeah, until you're happy that the level is completely safe.
Yeah.
Excellent. And one of the things you mentioned as well whilst you were explaining how the project's working is that you are doing some coding in Python at the moment. Now, obviously you did a maths degree at university. So did you do any coding at university, or is that something that you've purely been learning whilst you've been at Sellafield?
I did some at university. I did like a bit, but not in Python. And then I'd done like a tiny bit of Python in my dissertation, but it was all kind of, I taught myself it. So now I've learned some more for this. And there's also a couple of things like there's forums and things at Sellafield for people that like certain things. So say if you're very into coding and analysis and stuff, there are forums where people talk about what they've done. So it's kind of a case of people sharing what they've learned and what's worked well. So I've kind of picked it up as I've gone along.
So you've been supported to kind of get that skill whilst you've been doing this project.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. I think that's always really nice to hear, isn't it? You know, that you're picking up new skills all the way through the programme. I know that's obviously Lauren's really involved in the training and development of all the graduates, but I think this is always something that's really nice to pick up on, that just because you don't have a skill doesn't mean that, you know, you're not going to be supported to learn something new if you need it for a certain project, or if you have the initiative to go out and want to learn something new that's going to be beneficial to both your career progression and the business. Generally, you will be supported in doing so at a lot of organisations, and definitely obviously at Sellafield as well. So thank you, Iona. That was really insightful, really great to hear. I'm going to come to you now, Greg, to find out a little bit more about one of your favourite projects and what you've been doing so far.
Yeah, so my first project was a nice new shiny new building, and that was good to get us going. I worked in the pre-operation side of things, and we're looking at designing maintenance regimes for some of the mechanical components and plant, specifically the process pumps. But the current project I'm on is looking at one of the legacy facilities. So this was built alongside Calder Hall to sort of and the pile reactors when we were back producing plutonium. It was used as sort of kind of 6 large, kind of essentially well shielded grain silos, and they were designed to be sort of dumped into just various kind of contaminated waste, but with the thought of never having to retrieve again. But we now have to retrieve. We have to get the waste out of there. So we're now doing we're now working to commission the plant and the equipment to start retrievals. So I've been working quite closely with one of the it's called the the downstream facilities that provide some of the equipment to the plant, and I've been working a lot on the commissioning their crane and their lifting operations and equipment. So looking at kind of load testing, looking at sort of, as well as some things you don't think about is like the human factors side of it as well. So how do you make sure that, you know, we can deploy the right people at the right time in the right places to make sure that we can safely operate our equipment. So that's been really a really interesting aspect that I never really thought I'd get my hands on.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I mean, I imagine you must have to have really highly specialized machinery and equipment to be able to remove some of this waste that's been there for so many years. And how do you know sort of how to approach what machinery you're gonna need? Is that all led by your particular team, or are there other teams involved in that?
So that's more kind of heavily looked at sort of the optioneering side of things, but that'll be a kind of a collaboration of multiple teams, you know, from you know, from the design side of things to even procurement as well. Commissioning does come in quite does collaborate quite closely with design in something we call commissionability. Design like to make things as amazing and complicated and as well designed and tricky as possible, but sometimes that's not always the best solution, and where commissioning comes in, it can determine, you know, how well, no matter how well something is designed and how fantastic it operates, is it practical for us to test and maintain. So yeah, we come in, especially in commission, we can come in quite early in the design process as well.
And how long have you been working on this particular project so far?
So I've been on it for 6 months. Unfortunately, I'm just coming to the end of it. I've really enjoyed my time on this project. So I should have mentioned the name of it. It's PFCS, the Pile Fuel Cladding Silo. But I'm actually about to start a new interesting placement, which is more based on kind of practical engineering skills, which is something that kind of one of the reasons that I actually looked to join the Sellafield graduate scheme.
Brilliant. And how are those kind of rotations decided then, Greg? How come you're going to that particular area next? Is that because you've said, oh, I'm really interested in this side, or is it kind of all planned out before you arrive, or how does the rotation element of the scheme work? Yeah,
so I think every capability and every graduate scheme is a little bit different. Some are predetermined, and they have a little bit more control on where they'd like to go, and it's basically to help you build up your competencies and make you a well-rounded professional or engineer. For myself and commissioning, we get quite a bit of autonomy to move about, which I personally quite like that. It's good for understanding, you know, where your strengths and weaknesses lie. It's always good to move into a different role where potentially you need to improve in certain aspects of your professionalism and your career development, because it gives you the chance to obviously develop them. But in honesty, sometimes the best thing is to go somewhere that really interests you, which is sort of what I've done here. This is a very interesting, exciting project, and I knew that, you know, because I was a commissioning engineer going into commissioning role, I'd be able to really develop my kind of core competencies for my own capability.
Brilliant. And then after you've done your next sort of placement, will you have another 6-month placement after that, and will that then be the end of the scheme? So you've got 2 more placements to complete? Yeah,
so really the way that my scheme is sort of structured is kind of 4 6-month placements, with a sort of block in between all of that where we do some practical workshop skills. So my next placement after this will start after Christmas, where I'm working a more central team. I'm looking to move into event systems team, looking at kind of HVAC, and then after that I'm going to move to an external contractor that works really closely with Sellafield to do a design placement.
Fantastic. We're going to come back to you a little bit more on that in a little while to find some more details about what the future is going to be like. But that was really interesting to see what you've done so far, the projects and everything that you've been involved in as well. Because I mean, when you sit next to Iona and talk about what Iona's been doing and what you're doing, they're two amazing things, but two very, very different things. So I think that's a really good start to just getting that message out to our audience about that, the opportunities available. And we've still got Alex and Alfie to go. So Alex, I'm going to come to you next. Could you tell us about your favorite project, or just some of the key things that you've been involved in so far?
Yeah, of course. So my scheme is very similar to Greg's. So we do 4 6-month placements, which is great, really. It was the main thing for me why I kind of chose Sellafield in the first place, because civil engineering is a very broad subject. You've got geotechnical, you've got structural, you've got design analysis and stuff like that. So you come out of uni sort of aware of each part of civil engineering, but you're not sure. You might not be sure which one to actually go down, which discipline within civil engineering to go down. So yeah, this scheme really gives you an opportunity to, give each bit a go. So it's like you can do a geotechnical placement, you can be on new builds, you can be part of a structural team, etc. So my first placement was completely different to what I'm doing now. It was a nuclear new build. So I was part of the structures team designing an intermediate level waste storage facility. So it's basically a massive steel portal frame with 2 concrete vaults, which is where all these storage drums are going to be stored. And I was working with Jacobs employees, under one team. And yeah, so on top of the design work that I was doing, I also chaired some system requirements meetings, where basically you have these systems, for example, the building envelope, which would be the cladding, or the foundations, or the steelwork. So those are all systems in themselves, and you sit down with all the stakeholders and you discuss what requirements should be written under each system. So it gave me an opportunity to communicate with pretty much everyone in the design team. Really, I'm not just stuck in the civil engineering team. I'm talking to electrical engineers, talking to architects, talking to mechanical engineers, and yeah, I'd say it was a really good learning experience to me. And probably like the most enjoyable part of being part of that project.
Fantastic. And I think that's a really nice thing that you've touched upon there, Alex. It's the communication skills as well. We're talking more soft skills here, aren't we, around working with a range of different people. And you mentioned that you're working with some external companies as well, which is obviously a great opportunity too, not just working with internal people, internal employees, but also working with external. But I do think it's one of those things that often is underestimated during a graduate scheme, how important the soft skills are and how supported generally those are by employers as well, and obviously at Sellafield as well. So I think that's nice to touch upon how that's kind of supported and helping you grow as well at the organisation, as well as the technical side of things, which obviously is incredibly important. Whilst I've got you, Alex, I wanted to just briefly touch upon your experience as a year in industry returning to Sellafield and what that process looked like. So you did your year in industry, obviously loved it, otherwise you wouldn't be back where you are. What did that kind of finish look like? So you were finishing up your industrial placement and then you were offered a graduate position straight away. How did that process work to return?
So to get the placement scheme in the first place, I had to go through the normal assessment process. So I had an interview, had to produce a cover letter and CV and stuff. And then you go through the placement scheme. And once you get to the end of that, you have an interview with your senior coordinator. And then basically 2 months after your scheme finishes, you get an email, hopefully saying that, you're accepted onto the graduate scheme, or here's an opportunity to join the graduate scheme. So it was a lot more straightforward than a lot of my peers, because they were, on top of trying to write dissertations and trying to do 6 modules at once, they were trying to look for jobs at the same time, whereas I've been given the offer, I think in October it was. So yeah, it was, I'd say fairly straightforward.
That must have been so lovely when you got that email. I bet you were absolutely buzzing.
Yeah, no, it was great actually. Couldn't stop smiling.
No, that's brilliant. I mean, that is, that's a really key reason to do a year in industry placement, to return as a graduate. And like you said, with all your friends at university who are stressing about doing their dissertations and all their final year projects and work, and you were sat there thinking, oh yeah, I've got a job, I'm all right, because you've done that. But no, that's really great to hear. So yeah, obviously it's a fantastic opportunity to join Sellafield on their industrial placement scheme, and then you've got the opportunity to then return as a graduate. So there's 2 wins there. So thank you so much, Alex. Alfie, I'm going to come over to you next to find out a little bit more about your favourite projects.
Right, yeah, so my first placement at Sellafield saw me working within the project team, delivering the demolition of the Pile 1 chimney, which is a chimney on top of the old pile reactor building, approximately 120, 130 metres tall, and it remains contaminated to this day following the Windscale fire in 1957.
Oh.
So the structure is, you've got the chimney, which is sort of a typical chimney shape, and then it, on the top, had a rather sort of bulbous section, which it was called the diffuser and the filter gallery, so where there was filters in place to sort of filter out any of the smoke coming through. When I was on placement at the chimney, it was just about this time a year ago, they were finishing up the removal of the diffuser section, which was a very big job because so you've got 226 blocks have been removed from the top of this chimney. Average weight, so they range between 2 and 9 tons per block. So the total weight of sort of concrete and rebar and so on removed from the top of the chimney was 1,232 tons. So it all had to be cut up in situ at the top of this chimney and then lowered to ground via crane. So when you say demolition, a lot of people think wrecking balls, sticks, things like
what I was just thinking.
Yeah, blow it up.
Due to like the challenges around the contamination of the chimney and its location, those sort of more brutalistic methods of demolition aren't really, they're not possible. Yeah. So Sellafield's having to use these really bespoke, precise and innovative demolition methods to remove the blocks of the chimney in a safe and sort of effective manner whilst working within the constraints that we've got. So it was really good to be involved in a project like that, because if you've ever seen a picture of Sellafield site, the chimney is, I'd say, one of the most visible sort of iconic structures on the site. So going to work every day, and the days when I was in the office and walking sort of past that structure, 130 meters tall, it was something special to see that the work that you're doing as a graduate is actually contributing towards something much bigger than what you might expect. You think as a grad, you might sort of get told, go and write this document. It's not that important, so don't worry if you make a mistake. The stuff I was working on was seeing this really iconic structure being removed from the Sellafield skyline forever. So to me, that's probably one of the most special projects I've had the chance to work on so far.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think that's such a nice point to make as well. You were actually physically able to see exactly what the fruits of your labor, if you like. And I think that's really nice. And I think it's obviously a common theme at Sellafield. I mean, everybody that's spoken so far, Greg, Iona, Alex, or everything that you've been doing has got a real impact, and you've only been with the business for a year. And you're really heavily involved in some really complex, important projects already at this early stage in your career. So that's been really fascinating to hear just one of the projects that you've all been involved in so far. So I'm going to kind of come back to you. I'll stick with you, Alfie, just to see what the future holds for you at Sellafield and what you are planning to do next, and then longer term, if you can give us an ideal where you'll be in a few years' time.
Yeah, of course. So the future, sort of short term, for the duration of the rest of the grad scheme, it's going to see me finishing out my current placement in project controls for Legacy Ponds. Then I'll move on in about April time to a currently undetermined 4th placement, which will sort of wrap up my 2 years at Sellafield. I'll go through sort of all the typical, appraisals and so on. How have I progressed over the graduate scheme? And I hope to sort of stop on afterwards. And over the sort of next few years, I can see myself moving into a full-time project management role at Sellafield. and hopefully getting back to work on one of the projects that I've already covered across some of my placements. I've got a few favourites, as might be obvious, but it's the goal is to stop at Sellafield, because I think, first of all, as someone who's interested in pursuing chartership with the APM, the Association for Project Management, where else is going to give you exposure to as diverse, complex and challenging a portfolio of projects as Sellafield? Nowhere really. Especially as was mentioned earlier, it's all one site, so you've got so much going on in a space of, what was it, 6 Wembley stadiums. It's big, but it's also small at the same time, to have that much work going on in one place. So yeah, that's sort of what I see happening for me, getting my chartered project professional status through the APM and building that up with Sellafield.
Fantastic. And just to touch upon that, Alfie, you'll be supported by Sellafield to achieve that chartership status. Yeah,
of course. There's a very sort of well-defined career pathway for project management. So we, like Alex was saying, you've got Alex and Greg were saying, you've got different competencies which you need to sort of hit over your 2 years. That's how placements are determined, where you're going to get sent and how you're going to tick off these competencies, and they align very closely with the chartership process. It's much more focused around sort of the experiences you build over your actual career. So yeah, absolutely, Sellafield gives you the support on that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Alfie. Iona, coming over to you, when you, over the next sort of 6 months, 12 months, and then beyond, what's your plan for the future at Sellafield?
So in a couple of months' time, I'm going to go on secondment to strategy. So there's the main strategy department at Sellafield, which is not, I think most of the people there won't be anything won't have come through a maths route or anything. But the part I'm going into is looking at machine learning and using that to apply it to strategy, so things aren't so much decided by human bias and things, but can be more decided in a fairer way. So I'm going to be using that. And then when I get back, I've got a couple of courses lined up at Liverpool Uni. So they're more practical, because when you join the graduate scheme, you do a bit of nuclear industry and nuclear science learning as part of the graduate scheme. But these are more practical courses and a bit more in depth. And then long term, I'd quite like to see if I can bring more machine learning into what I'm doing, when I go back to radiometrics. Yeah, and just see where else it can be applied, really.
Fantastic. Thank you, Iona. It's big plans for the future, changing everything at Sellafield with machine learning. And then Alex, over to you. What does the future look like for you?
So short term, I'll be moving to the analysis department in a few weeks, actually. That's looking at supporting other new build projects on site. So I'll be looking at the seismic analysis of one of these new builds, because one of the things you've got to design for on Sellafield site is actually seismic, so earthquakes basically, which you don't get an opportunity to design for elsewhere in the UK, because obviously the earthquakes that we experience aren't that great in magnitude. When it comes to nuclear safety, you've got to think about the consequences of, what if a 1 in 500 year earthquake does actually happen? What are the consequences of that? So that'll be interesting. I think it's a bit more technical than what I've been doing previously, and a bit of coding as well. So I'll get the opportunity to learn how to code. You spend the first month basically getting taught how to use the software and stuff. So yeah, it'll be another skill to add to the list.
Fantastic. And then when you complete the program, what's the plan there?
Yeah, so plan is to continue on with Sellafield and hopefully get chartered, which should take about 3 or 4 years, I think. And yeah, basically the main reason why I want to stay with Sellafield, definitely up until chartership, is because they do have quite a good support program for it. You're assigned a mentor who's either just gone through their chartership program, or they've been responsible engineers for a certain amount of time. So yeah, the support program for chartership is really good, especially from the engineering side of things.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alex. And finally, Greg, coming back to you. I know we've heard about your journey on the rest of the graduate program, but what's the plan for after then?
Yeah, I think just much similar to the rest of the guys. It's just continuing with my professional development. You know, striving for chartership, and just to kind of to hang on to Sellafield and go with it, because again, like you can probably tell some of the projects are very exciting. I would like to see the opportunity to go back and as a bit more of a senior team member and take charge of some of that commissioning work that's been done.
Fantastic, thank you, Greg. I'm going to hand over to Carla again now to come back to hear about some hints and tips, but I think we've found out now about all the different things that graduates and undergraduates can do at Sellafield, and now Carla's going to tell us about how you can be successful in their applications.
Absolutely, thank you, Sophie. Thank you, everybody else. But before that, I've got to grips with, Sellafield, what you do, your current roles at Sellafield. But can we just kind of touch on extracurricular things that you might get up to? So, for example, any networking groups that you're part of, sports and activities, things like that. And Greg, I'm going to come back to you because you're my first on my screen. So, anything outside of the the day job that you might be involved in?
Yeah, I've been picked on here. So yeah, I was brought up just outside of Glasgow, lived in Edinburgh for 5 years, so I was very much a city boy. But moving to West Cumbria is very different, and there's no hiding that it can be an adjustment for some people, but the graduate community that we've got here is brilliant. You're well looked after by your peers who are ultimately your friends as well. There's always stuff going on planned by the graduate council, socials and fundraisers and whatnot. But outside of it, there's plenty to do. Myself, when I moved here, I joined one of the local rugby clubs, so that's a really good social network for myself. And then, like they said, with professional institutes as well, there's a great representation from all institutes. Myself, I'm Institute Mechanical Engineering, so I was recently at a talk with Rolls-Royce, who were chatting about the future of the nuclear industry, looking at how Rolls-Royce are impacting nuclear reactors and whatnot. So there's such a variety to get involved with, and I mean, all you need to do is sort of look outside and see you are sort of living in one of the most beautiful parts of the country, which isn't the worst thing in the world.
No, it is not. I think that's so important, isn't it, Greg, about thinking about your location, to have that graduate community, to have those separate networking groups as well. So sorry if that was picking on you. Anybody else, Iona, Alex, Alfie, anything that you do kind of outside that you might want to share with the people who are watching?
I was going to say, Greg sort of touched on it there. We've got the Graduate Council, which is made up of graduates. There's a lot of different functions within that. So socials, fundraising, STEM and education, so social impact, things like that. I've been acting as one of the social secretaries for site since about the start of this year. We've had some good social events, just to pick a few. We've had go-karting, forest segwaying, so on off-road segways, which was good fun. We had a crazy charity bingo event just back in start of September rather. Things like trips down to Manchester. It's a very strong graduate community, I think, because like Greg was saying, a lot of people have relocated, and it's not like living in a big city, but you've also got so much opportunity, and you've got the Lake District, you've got a lot of sort of smaller scale things around the area that are really good to get involved in. So I think, that's probably one of the really good things about the graduate scheme, I think, is that you've got this graduate council that really kind of ties everyone together and pulls some good events together. There's good support around chartership. We've got a WhatsApp group with about 70 odd of us in. If anyone's got a question, it goes in. 30 seconds later, an answer comes out. So that's a really strong point, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, where your location is as well, you're not too far away from the cities. I used to like nightlife and things like that. So there is the perfect balance, the peace and quiet and the commutable distance to more livelier venues, should we say. So thank you, Alfie, for that. Lauren, I'm going to come back to you. So the grads have mentioned lots of training and development activities. So for example, you know, forums, workshop, chartership is something that's huge at Sellafield. Is there anything that you want to touch on that you want to mention as part of the webinar? You know, you've been responsible for training and development.
Yeah, I think just to reiterate kind of what Alfie was saying and Greg around the Graduate Council, it is a really established group of individuals that we utilise as a graduate development team too. So they are an acknowledged council within the organisation that support us with many events as well. So there's a really good from an extracurricular perspective development opportunities through them. And as part of that role, all new recruits will get assigned a graduate buddy who is from the earlier intake, so just to help with that transition from university to working life as well. So all graduates get that as a support network for them too, and that's through the Graduate Council. So just to touch on that. In relation to the Learning and Development Milestone scheme of the graduate scheme, there's three main elements. So there's the behavioural side, and that's a lot more to do with our team. So we have a structured syllabus that all graduates will go through as part of their scheme, and the main aim of that is around behavioural development, personal development. We spoke earlier on some of the softer skills, so communication, self-awareness, and also understanding where you fit within a team and how you can effectively communicate with different people that may have a different way of viewing the world. And so not only self-awareness, but how you can translate that into the workplace. There's a bit of stuff that we do around that, both supportive sessions as well as we do outward bound, so it's a bit more like experiential learning. So there's a good mix of both. I don't want to use the term courses because they're not necessarily courses, but like events, as well as kind of, as I say, like going out and experiencing something. Outward bounds is just something completely different. And as like a safe environment to test some of the leadership skills and things. So we have the behavioural side. Then there's the business context side, so that is around inducting and welcoming to the company. We do something called the GAIN programme, which is Graduate Awareness in Nuclear. So all graduates, actually all early careers, undertake part of that programme, but this is graduate specific, and it really is that basis of understanding of the nuclear industry and kind of the different. All graduates undertake qualification in that. There's also some guest lectures and things that go alongside it, so that's just to ensure that there's a basis of understanding of the nuclear industry. And then obviously you've got on the job learning as well, plant tours. There's loads and loads of different business contexts that there's an opportunity to get involved in. And then finally, there's the technical element of the roles and the scheme, and that primarily is around the placements that have already been kind of touched on the job experience, and really embracing delivery with some meaningful work, which I hope has been kind of articulated by some of the grads. It does vary pathway to pathway. So there's one graduate scheme, there's different pathways within, so you've already heard from like a commissioning perspective, project management perspective, technical, so there's different pathways that form part of the graduate scheme, but you'll do placements around them, with the ultimate aim of becoming chartered. That's the intention of the 2-year scheme, is to set you on the right track to become chartered with all the support network around you. And some of the main kind of bodies we're accredited through is like ICME, IMechE, IET. So there's an acknowledged scheme to provide you with the behavioural development that you require to go on to chartership. So it's not just something we've kind of made up, it's established, and you know we've got them links in with these communities that acknowledge it as a useful part of individuals' development. There's so much more I could talk about it for a long time, but I won't. But yeah, it's a really, really established programme that we aim to give you all the kind of basis level of skills to kind of go on and succeed after the scheme.
I love that, Lauren, and I love the fact that it's all set out from the beginning as well. You know, your plan is when you get the grads in to take them through chartership and allow them to achieve chartership through the different rotations and things like that. I know that, you know, nurturing young talent is something that Sellafield is really passionate about. So thank you very much, Lauren, for that section. So Molly. Okay, we're going to end with you. So we've definitely inspired students to apply to your positions. They go to Gradcracker, they find the perfect position for them, they apply. Take us then through that process. What can they expect?
Yep, so the Gradcracker website will send you back through to our website to apply through our live portal. Yeah. And I said earlier, it is live for all schemes at the moment. Yeah. Now, some of our graduate schemes are due to close on Sunday. So if you are interested after today's session, it is worth going on and working on your application over the weekend. But what will happen is you'll submit your application, and then myself and my colleagues in the recruitment team will just scan through to check you are eligible to apply for whichever scheme you've applied for. And if you are, send you through to what we call a profession CV review, where the person, an employee from Sellafield, from the area, will check through your CV and your application and decide whether they'd like to take you on to the next stage. Yeah. So after that next stage, if you are successful, we'll send you an aptitude test. You need to complete and pass that aptitude test. And then if you do, you'll go on to the first video interview stage. Mm-hmm. So the first interview is a 45-minute behavioural themed interview over Teams. So it doesn't matter where you are, you could be anywhere in the world, you can join that video interview. Yeah. And it's a one-on-one interview with someone from that profession, and they will decide following that interview whether they'd like to carry you on to the next stage. So the final stage for the graduate recruitment is a virtual assessment centre. Similar to today's setup, we'll all join together, whether it be on Teams rather than Zoom, but we'll join together and you'll sit through a series of activities. It's a half-day event from about 8 a.m. Until about 1 p.m, but you get a load of guidance beforehand as well. So you're all set well for the day.
Is that... Sorry, go on. I think we were going to say something. You go, Molly.
Yeah, so following that is the final stage. So following that, if you are successful, you will receive a conditional offer from the recruitment team. Now, this we call all offers conditional offers because you do need to achieve security clearance and medical clearance, and also do one or above in your degree before we can make that permanent offer. Mm-hmm. That's for the graduates. It's a slightly simpler process if you're applying for an industrial or a summer placement scheme. You still need to apply. You go through to CV review, but it is just the one video interview that will determine whether you're accepted onto the scheme. So no assessment centres for you. You'll just do one video interview, and then if you're successful, we'll issue a conditional offer.
Fantastic. That's what I was going to ask you about the internship process. So you got there before me. So Molly, any hints and tips then for students? How can they get ahead?
Yeah, I think what we're finding this year, the biggest tip we will give, we understand you're applying for other companies, you're applying for lots of different opportunities, but have a research into Sellafield and really tailor your application to our schemes that we've got on offer. What we are finding is the people that aren't making it through to interview stage are the people that are submitting really generic applications. You could just copy and paste from one company to the next. So do your research, go onto our website. You could have been inspired by one of the graduates that we've got on now, but each profession area has a section on our website where you can read through each. I'm just checking I've not frozen, sorry.
You haven't.
Check through each different activity, profession area, and you can decide from there where you would like to apply. So you might have done some work at university, or you might have some real life work experience, and you can decide which scheme you'd like to apply for.
I think Molly has frozen now. So I think Molly was going to end in just to finish off that section, it's all about doing your research. As Molly mentioned, There's lots and lots of information out there. Go onto the Sellafield hub on Gradcracker. You know, there's employee profiles on there, there's video profiles, and then also obviously this webinar. So just to finish off, this webinar will be live this afternoon. So if you want to rewatch, you can do, or it's broken into bite-sized chunks, which will be live on Gradcracker tomorrow. Mention the webinar as part of the application process. You know, you'll be meeting Molly. After you've been successful, you'll be meeting Lauren. So make sure you mention us and make them feel famous, which they obviously are. Hi, Molly. I've just finished off your bit. I think I knew what you were going to say about doing your research. So make sure you do your research, tailor your application. That's absolutely pivotal to being successful. So yes, thank you everybody for joining us today. It's been really, really insightful. I'm guessing the graduates have inspired everybody who's watching to be part of Sellafield and the nuclear industry. Next week, we are joined by Siemens. So register your interest to their webinar today. And thank you very much, Sellafield, for joining us. Take care, everybody. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.